Okay, let's travel back in time. Way back. Over 2,500 years ago, in the bustling Greek city of Miletus, one man asked a question that would pretty much change the world. His name was Anaximander, and he wasn't just a philosopher. He was a revolutionary thinker who kickstarted a whole new way of looking at the universe, really setting the stage for science itself.
I mean, just think about that for a second. Try to put yourself in his shoes. For all of human history up to that point, everything, the sun rising, a thunderstorm, everything was explained as the work of the gods. But Anaximander and a few other thinkers in his city decided to try something completely radical, to explain the world using only reason and observation. This wasn't just a new idea, it was a fundamental shift in how humans saw their place in the cosmos.
So if you're gonna do that, where do you even start? Well, these first Greek philosophers were kinda obsessed with this one huge question. What is the one fundamental substance that everything else comes from? They were basically searching for the ultimate source code of reality.
Now, Anaximander's teacher, a brilliant guy named Thales, he had an answer. He said it was water. And hey, it's a great idea, right? Water is essential for life. It can be a solid, a liquid, a gas, it's everywhere. But Anaximander, even though he was the student, wasn't completely satisfied. He asked a really sharp question. If everything is made of water, which is wet and cold, how do you explain its opposite? Like fire, which is hot and dry. How can one specific thing create its total opposite?
This whole hunt for a fundamental substance was so important they even had a name for it, the archai. The word basically meant beginning, but Anaximander really elevated it into this powerful philosophical concept, the ultimate underlying principle of everything that exists. He wasn't just asking what came first, he was asking what was the most real.
So what was his answer to Thales? It was an incredible leap of abstract thought. Anaximander said the arche couldn't be water or fire or anything we can see and touch. He said it was something he called the apeiron, which means the limitless, the boundless, the indefinite. Just imagine an infinite, eternal, unobservable something from which all the elements of our world emerge. It's a mind-bending idea that sounds strangely modern, kind of like a precursor to concepts like the singularity before the Big Bang, the state of infinite potential that everything we know bursts out of.
And the way he said it all worked? Just as revolutionary. He argued that the world forms when opposites, like hot and cold or wet and dry, separate out from the aparent. This wasn't a god making a decision, it was a natural, necessary process. In one of the very first fragments of Western philosophy we have, he poetically wrote that things give justice and recompense to each other for their injustice, which is basically his way of describing a universe governed by a natural law of balance.
Okay, so this new way of thinking, it led Anaximander to his next totally mind-bending idea, one that would completely redraw humanity's map of the cosmos.
Look, every single culture before this guy believed the Earth had to be resting on something, on water, on giant pillars, maybe the back of a huge turtle. Anaximander just threw all that out. He declared that the Earth floats, completely unsupported, right in the center of the infinite. And why doesn't it fall? Because in a perfectly symmetrical universe, there's no up or down for it to fall to. It stays put, as he put it, because of its indifference. Just an incredible thought.
And this wasn't just some wild guess. He actually built a mechanical model of the cosmos to explain it all, the first one we know of. First, he pictured a giant sphere of fire all around the early Earth. Then, that sphere broke apart, forming these huge, hollow wheels full of fire. And finally, what we see is the sun, the moon, and the stars. They're just holes in these wheels, like celestial vents that let us peek at the fire inside. And eclipses? Oh, that's just the holes getting blocked for a bit. A purely physical explanation for the heavens. No gods required.
Okay, so here's the really crucial part. If the Earth is floating in space, then the sun and the stars can go under it at night. That simple idea, it completely flipped our view of the heavens from a flat dome above us to a three-dimensional sphere all around us. It's the conceptual breakthrough that made all of Western astronomy even possible.
You'd think reimagining the entire cosmos would be enough for one lifetime, right? Nope. Anaximander then turned his rational mind to the origin of life itself. And what he came up with is, well, startlingly familiar.
So what we hear from ancient writers is this. Anaximander theorized that life actually began in the sea. He proposed that the very first humans grew up inside fish-like creatures, and they only came out onto land when they were old enough to take care of themselves. Now I know,
The details sound a little weird, right? But the core idea is just stunning. Humans weren't created just as we are now. We actually evolved from another species.
And this is a perfect example of his method in action. He wasn't just making up a myth. He was trying to solve a logical problem. Anaximander looked at human babies and saw that they're uniquely helpless for years. He figured there was no way they could have survived in the harsh early world. So they must have been protected somehow while they developed. And this fish-like womb was his proposed solution. It's logic, not myth.
So you have to ask yourself, how on earth did one guy, 2,500 years ago, come up with theories about a boundless cosmos, evolution, and a floating Earth? These weren't just lucky guesses. They were the result of a completely new way of thinking about the world.
See, before Anaximander, the way it worked was pretty simple. Knowledge was passed down from master to student, and you were just supposed to accept it. But Anaximander, he respected his teacher Thales, but he didn't just blindly accept his ideas. He looked at them critically, he found the flaws, and he proposed a better theory. This whole tradition of open, critical debate, that's the very heart of all scientific and philosophical progress. And that might be his greatest contribution. It wasn't just what he thought, it was how he thought.
So, who was this guy really? Well, he was born around 610 BC in that thriving city of Miletus. And his genius wasn't just theoretical, he was intensely practical. He wrote one of the very first books in prose called On Nature, but he also drew the first map of the known world, a huge deal for sailors and politicians at the time. He brought the gnomon to Greece. That's a pretty sophisticated kind of sundial, which let them track the seasons accurately. He was a political leader. Some ancient sources even say he predicted an earthquake. This was a man of action, applying his brilliant mind to everything from the cosmos to the very real challenges on the ground. All right, so when you put all these pieces together, his abstract theories, his practical inventions, and his new way of critical thinking, you start to see why a lot of people consider Anaximander to be the true father of science.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. The famous 20th century philosopher of science, Karl Popper, called his idea of a floating Earth one of the boldest, most revolutionary ideas in the whole history of human thinking. It just required an incredible ability to ignore common sense and trust in pure reason. And really, that's the bottom line. That's his legacy. A lot of his specific theories were, of course, wrong. The sun isn't a hole in a giant wheel of fire. But his method was profoundly, powerfully right. He showed humanity that we could try to understand the universe on its own terms, using our own minds, without needing to bring the supernatural into it. Which kind of leaves us with one final big question. Anaximander taught us to question everything, even the ideas of our smartest teachers. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What fundamental truth that we all take for granted today is just waiting for the next Anaximander to come along and show us a completely new way of seeing the world?
Anaximander dropped a theory that was breaking the code. Earth floats in the center on its own in a free-fall mode, shaped like a cylinder. He ditched the myths, went full throttle. No gods holding it up, just a clean mechanical model.